Good morning. Welcome to Calendar and Rules. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Representatives Beck, Camper, Curcio, Darby, Faison, Halford, Hazelwood, Howell, Jernigan, Kiesling, Kumar, McKenzie, Mitchell, Lamberth, Marsh, Reedy, Terry, Warner, Weaver, Speaker Sexton, Vice Chairman Russell, Chairman Zachary.
Here.
Mr. Chairman of Court.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Members, any personal orders before we get started? Okay, seeing none, we'll jump right into our calendar. We have two bills on our calendar, members. If you are familiar with this committee at all, we typically move very quickly in this committee, but we'll slow down this morning, give everyone time to ask questions. I know there was an amendment added in finance, and I've already been asked a question about that, so those questions will be directed to the sponsor. So we will still move quickly, but we will take our time and not rush anybody. So if you have questions, feel free to direct those to the sponsor. First up on our calendar, members, is item number 1, which is House Bill 8002 being carried by Leader Lamberth. Leader Lamberth, you are recognized. We have a motion and a second. Bill's properly before us. Members, discussions or questions? Leader Lamberth, actually, you know what, Leader Lamberth, we'll go to you first. If you'd like to give a brief explanation, is this the bill that we just added the amendment to in finance? Leader?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if we're on 8002, this is the appropriation bill.
Okay.
And this is not a bill that we just added amendment to in finance. This is in essence as it was filed. There may have been, I'm looking at legal if they're in the room, I don't even think there's been a technical correction on this one. I think this is as filed.
Okay. Thank you, Leader. Members, discussion or questions? Seeing Representative Weaver, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Sponsor, for being here today. And thank you for allowing me to ask questions. I've not had an opportunity to ask any questions. I have many. I'll try to keep them down to minimal. Leader Lamberth, I have a question in the appropriations bill where it says Section 2 in capital outlay. I guess I have a question to ask you. Help me to understand this. Are we not privatizing profits and socializing losses with Ford and this SK Venture business, leaving the people of Tennessee left holding the bag?
Leader Lamberth.
Absolutely not. Not in any way, shape, form, or fashion. What we're doing is a shared venture. It's a public-private partnership, just as we do every single year with growing American companies that will invest in areas of Tennessee that, quite frankly, just based on the bottom line, they probably would not do so. You and I share a district that is thriving and, quite frankly, needs very little economic incentive in any kind of public-private partnership for businesses to come there. There are lots of there's lots of infrastructure in Middle Tennessee. There's lots of employees in Middle Tennessee. Quite frankly, there's an enormous amount of wealth in Middle Tennessee. When you travel between Jackson and Memphis, the opposite is true. There's very little infrastructure. There is very little wealth. And quite frankly, you meet a number of people, at least I have in my life, that say they are from that area. They no longer live in that area. The families there, and I know Representative Hurt and Gant could talk to this, they cannot dream of their children growing up in their community. So it takes the rest of us in Tennessee from time to time to partner with certain communities and, yes, certain private entities so that we're investing $884 million of surplus funds. We underspend our budget every year. Boy, don't we wish that certain other states and the feds and even some individuals and businesses would do that. It's a good budgeting method that as Republicans and Democrats we have done for decades in Tennessee. And we have surplus one-time funds to be able to spend on this in literally a public-private partnership. Whether they make money or not is entirely up to these businesses that locate there. What we are requiring of them is that for our $884 million investment, they are investing approximately almost $6 billion. So far exceeding anything we are actually investing. And again, of part of that investment, just as a reminder, 138 million of that is really more for the water. 40 million is for a TCAT, 200 million is for roads. Those are hard infrastructure items that are needed in that area. Whether it's this project or any project, it's going to pay off for that area for years to come and generations to come. So the remaining portion of this, we get a return on our investment in less than 15 years. That's based on $178 million in sales tax from the actual construction of this massive facility on the 4,000 acre plot. And then on top of that, approximately $22 million a year that we're simply not seeing right now that will come into the state of Tennessee. That's not including in any way all of the other ancillary sales tax dollars that would come in for hotels, restaurants, retail, homes that are being built in the area, people that are moving to the area, something we enjoy in Sumner County every single year. These people come and flock to our county. My district alone grew over 20% in the last census. The area where this investment is going in has shrunk. So for those families there, for those individuals there, we as Tennesseans are partnering with businesses and with those local individuals to ensure that they have a good economic future.
Representative Weaver.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for that explanation. I am very ecstatic that actually I look at across this committee and I see colleagues that I've worked with. I've been here since 2009 and probably was one of the first ones to vote on the mega site budgets every year. And the 250 million that I believe so far over the course from 2009 to currently, not including what we're going to give into the 2022 budget. I'm just saying that we have invested millions and millions into this mega site. And yet, and I understand we're in hopes of, and I'm standing with you in believing as well, that we do get the return of this investment. And I do see it's important for people to have jobs, but we have done our part as a state legislator to keep our taxes low. We've created a thriving atmosphere for businesses to thrive here. That is the reason why our revenues are up all the time, because people really are leaving and fleeing their states to come here so that they can thrive. That's our job as legislators, to keep legislation in place so that that can happen. I'm proud of that, and I'm proud to have worked alongside many of you sitting here on this committee, and that's a good thing. What I am concerned of is that we're picking winners and losers. We are creating an atmosphere now for other corporations to come here and want the same thing. If we continue to do this, aren't we creating a pathway that brings corporate industries here to co-partner with government to give them even more power? In fact, if I'm understanding this correctly, isn't Ford a UAW organization? Aren't they based on values that we do not hold here in Tennessee when we're about ready to add to our Constitution that we are a right to work state? Help me understand why this company is everything that Tennessee embraces.
Leader Lamberth.
So 2 quick things on that, and all good questions and good points, and thank you, my friend, for asking them. In Ford's other facilities in other states, the UAW, which is a completely separate entity, and trust me, Ford and both UAW would back that up. I mean, they, by definition, are sometimes adversarial and sometimes not, the UAW and Ford. So unions are something that's just what they are. They're a separate entity. So Ford itself is a company, and they're an American company that makes iconic vehicles like the Mustang, the F-150 that I drive. That's what they do and have done so for just about as long as we've been making automobiles here in this country. So most of that industrial development when it comes to automobiles has been up north. They're strong union states. Their laws on the books are not right to work. They're not like Tennessee. When hopefully we pass this And not just Ford, but Ford, SK, other companies. I mean, I want to be crystal clear. This is not a bill about Ford. Ford just happens to be a large tenant on this mega site. This is a bill about the mega site that we've been involved in for over a decade as a state. We now have a large tenant and several other tenants that will be joining together in a joint venture here and be on that property. So it's not about any one company, but all of the companies that locate there, just like any other company could, their employees have the right to vote as to whether or not to be a union shop. That's a right that they have. I would hope that they would choose not to be. Next year on the ballot, we've approved a constitutional amendment to enshrine in our Constitution that this is a right to work state. But that doesn't mean you don't also have a right to organize a union if you so desire to do so. I would disagree with that. You obviously would disagree with that. I think most of us would. But that's those workers' rights to decide on their own how they want their workplace to be. So it's not by any means guaranteed that that's going to be a union shop. That's going to be up to the workers that are hired there, and then for them to be able to vote. I will indicate that, or just bring up as an example, Volkswagen has had that vote a couple of times, and their workers there, even though Volkswagen virtually everywhere else is a union shop, have said that they would like to not be a union shop and be free to engage with their employer without that intermediary. I will say just something that you may have seen this morning. I'd like to read a quote here. It says, Tennesseans will reap benefits in the billions with the successful completion of Ford Motor Company's Blue Oval City. That's just a part of this megasite. The investment to complete the project is modest compared to the projected returns. This proposal is both transformational for Tennessee's economy and the future of American manufacturing. Dr. Arthur B. Laffer. So, I mean, that's a person who, as far as I'm concerned, is one of the most renowned conservative economists out there. His stamp of approval on this means a lot to me. I figured I'd at least bring that up. He evaluates these things all day, every day. And that's his evaluation of at least this particular structure. It's a public-private partnership, and that's what this will do going forward.
Representative Weaver, I'll go to you for one more question, and I've
That's
got other
fine.
members that want to ask, and then we can come back to you.
And
after.
thank you. And thank you.
Representative Weaver.
Thank you for your indulgence. I appreciate it. Just one more question. If I did my math right, I figured out that with the $884 million to create 5,800 jobs, that Tennesseans are paying $152,413 per job created. We're paying that per one job created, and we're not guaranteed any of these jobs. I'm hoping that they do get jobs. But again, that's my question. That's just not even a question. It's a statement. But I'm very concerned with the process that we are beginning to start here in the state of Tennessee when it comes to bringing jobs here. I just really think that we have done an amazing job by creating the businesses that have come here, by allowing free market to work on its own without having help of government. I think it's very dangerous precedent going forward because we end up creating corporations that are in cahoots with governments that very much so go against the very things I, as a conservative, stand for in the state of Tennessee and my district as well. I believe that on my push card that I have had since I've been elected in 2009, it says, Terry Lynn Weaver, faithful to our values. I believe the values we are going down from this point on are not faithful to the values of Tennesseans. And so I will be voting red, and I'd like to be on the record as red, voting against the Blue Oval City. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Leader, would you like to respond?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for those comments. We've been friends for years and will always remain so. I could not possibly disagree with you more. As an ardent conservative, a public-private partnership we do every single year. And for all of us that have voted, and all of us though that have voted for the budgets, we have invested anywhere from $100 to $300 million a year in ECD projects throughout this state. It's difficult for me to say no to West Tennessee when we've said yes to Sumner County, when we've said yes to other counties, when we've said yes over and over and over again as conservative lawmakers. It's just hard for me to look at the folks from Jackson and Memphis and say, we said yes to everything else, but we're going to say no to you. And I respect your vote. I always have and always will. And I know you to be an ardent conservative and a dear friend and a passionate advocate for your district. Everybody votes their own conscience in this. but I just can't say yes to everybody else and then say no to these folks. And these are good, solid blue collar jobs. These are the kind of folks that we all know and love in our communities. They put in a good day's work. They love their families, and they want their kids to do a little bit better than they do, and hopefully stay close to home. I'll tell a little quick story and then I'll shut up. But I was sitting on the back porch with my 10-year-old son the other day, and it warmed my heart as a father because he pointed at the field next to us, which I didn't have the heart to break to him. Didn't break it to him. We didn't own, but he said, "Daddy, I want to live right there so I can take my kids on a creek walk when I have them someday. And if we get tired on the way home, we can stop at your house." That's just cool, y'all. And so I want the folks in West Tennessee to be able to do that instead of call their kids every now and again wherever they're living because they couldn't get a job in their own hometown. So I'm with you, but this is how we get that done. And I hope that the rest of this committee will support this. And again, I absolutely respect the fact that you will not. But it's just, as a conservative, I think this is a conservative approach to this, to invest money that we have in the bank for those folks' futures.
All right, members, next up on our list, I've got Chairman Howell. Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Leader, for bringing this bill. I just want to say that I have a question. I have a little experience with automotive plants. It's not in my district, but it backs up against 3 rural counties that I represent, Bradley, Polk, and Meigs, and I have probably hundreds of residents, citizens who work at that facility, and I can tell you they're glad it's there because it has raised their status, their standard of living has improved, and I believe it'll do the same thing. And it will change the culture. There's no doubt about that. But I think so far I have seen from Volkswagen, the good has far outweighed the bad. I do have a question just for clarification and for the record. In looking through the bill, Section 3, Department of Transportation is mentioned with a sum of $200 million. And for the record, could you clarify that this is not coming from the TDOT budget?
Leader Lamberth.
Absolutely. And as the chairman of transportation, this is a conversation you and I have had for many years. There are ECD projects that come out of TDOT's budget every single year. And I had mentioned this earlier and no one's corrected me. So I think the number is somewhere between 70 to 80 million. That's out of TDOT's budget. That's from the gas tax and everything else. But when it's an ECD project, that goes away from everything from filling potholes to expanding lanes to safety projects. And yes, that's necessary. But the conversation the chairman and I have had is, why shouldn't that come out of the general fund? If it's an ECD project, why should it have to come out of TDOT's budget just because it happens to involve pavement? And so this $200 million comes out of unspent surplus dollars, and so does all of this bill, quite frankly, that we all left on the table last year, that we chose not to spend. We restrained ourselves from spending and chose not to. And this $200 million for the first time will go to road projects in that area because they're primarily ECD in nature. And my hope, and I think, Chairman, probably yours, is that this will set the tone for down the road, that if it's an ECD project, we take that out of the general fund and we invest in those roadways without taking out of TDOT's ability to be able to put those roads down elsewhere. So that is a separate sum of money that will come from the general fund.
Thank you, Leader. Speaker Sexton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's much debate about this as we go forward. I think there's a couple things not to lose perspective on. Is one of the things that we had to do years ago was put in clawbacks, because what we have learned is sometimes there were deals that were made and they were not fully followed through on, and the state did not have the capability of achieving the money that we put in back for an outcome that we did not get. So even though we're submitting money, we do still have the capability, if the goals and the contracts are not met, we get the money back, so the state doesn't lose the ability that we have, for example, in the Clarksville deal years ago. I think the other thing to keep in mind is any good conservative is government needs to, and we have started looking at the return on investment. It's never good for a government to just throw money out the window and never see if it's going to return its investment back to the Tennessee or back to its body. I think this investment into West Tennessee will return our investment threefold over easy over the life of this manufacturing plant. And so is it a lot of money? That could be argued, yes. But will we have a return investment that you would want if you were running a business or if you were investing in the market? Yes, you would. And so does that mean it's better for the state of Tennessee? Yes, it does. The other thing I would say is what we also know, if you've been watching redistricting, we know we're losing 2 seats in West Tennessee. And why are we losing 2 seats in West Tennessee? Because the West Tennessee population is going south to North Mississippi and it's moving to Middle Tennessee. And so that's what's happening in West Tennessee. So this is an attempt to stabilize West Tennessee, to continue to let them have voices in the legislature and not continue to have less voices representing them, which is what will happen if we don't go through with this and make this happen. And so this gives West Tennessee a voice here, which is what they need. And then the final thing to think about is I thought we're about changing lives of people and giving people hope and having the ability to have an opportunity that maybe their parents and grandparents did not have. This will give people in West Tennessee the opportunity to be successful, to have a good paying job, just like they said about Chattanooga and how that transformed Chattanooga. Same questions were raised about the unions and everything else. But if we're here to give people the opportunity to be successful and increase the skilled labor force and have more engineers, we just appropriated money to the University of Memphis for a new engineering building, which will be vitally important in having more engineers in West Tennessee to help with this project. Bring in a TCAT to this area to help with people who would be skilled. The opportunity to allow Tennesseans to be successful shouldn't go unnoticed here, and allow them to do things that their grandparents could have never done and be able to stay in the area that they love. Because right now what we've seen is 120,000 people move and 150,000 increase in northern Mississippi. That's the issue that we're having. And then the last premise that I think is a false premise is we're assuming that Ford will change Tennessee. Has anybody else ever changed Tennessee? Or does Tennessee change them? I think you have to give stock that Tennessee has been doing it right for a lot of years. And we have the capability of working with Ford in this case and other people, but introducing them to something that Michigan does not have to offer. And so I don't think you can assume that Ford's going to change us. I think we have a better chance of changing Ford to the way that Tennessee is. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Before I go to Representative Beck, Leader, I think Speaker brought up a good point regarding clawbacks. You and I have had this discussion a few times. My concern related to making sure we hold Ford and any company that's coming into the mega site accountable. From what I've read in the legislation, the clawbacks on this look different than any other ECD legislation I've looked at in the 4 terms I've been here. Can you go into that in a little more detail for the members, please? Leader, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely. So most of the time when we do any kind of again, public-private partnership in an ECD investment, it's normally about a 5-year clawback provision. And so this is a larger project. It's a 10-year clawback provision. And so that's an accountability measure that's built into this so that they're checking along the way throughout that to make sure that they are actually employing more than 5,700 folks. And at the end of 10 years, they'll have to still have employed 90% of that labor force. So they can't take their foot off the gas. They have got to follow through with this. And if they don't, we get the people's money back. And I think that 10-year is absolutely critical to this entire thing to make sure that, as just the Speaker said, that we have those clawbacks and have that accountability measures there so that we're very careful with spending the people's money in this fashion.
Thank you, Leader. Representative Beck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader Lambeth, just a couple of quick questions. I didn't get to watch the finance. How much of the 570 million is coming from EDC's budget right now, and how much will be coming out of the rainy day fund?
Leader Lambert.
Great question. This will not come from ECD's current budget. Their budget could not handle this. This is an investment beyond that scope. And so this will come from, again, unspent resources that we left on the table in this past year's budget. We're not amending that budget. We're not changing that. We're not taking anything out of that budget. This is literally over collections that have come in above and beyond the budgeted amount that we spent this last year. And we're not taking anything out of the rainy day fund. That would be, I think, a bad idea in this circumstance. I mean, that's our savings. We've built that up over the years. It's at the highest level, I believe, it's ever been. And so this is not coming from rainy day fund. This is literally coming from surplus dollars that are over collections to this juncture.
Representative Beck, additional questions?
Yes, very good. Second question is, you mentioned S&K. I've tried to Google them several times, and it says they're a petroleum company. Can you tell me about S&K and if they've worked out a joint agreement with Ford at this point, or what is their role in this development?
Leader Lamberth.
By the way, to my knowledge, I don't think I've ever actually spoken to anybody from Ford leadership or SK. I don't know these folks, and I don't know the history of their companies other than what I've shared with the committee. I know Ford because we all know Ford. The SK, I think it's SK Innovations. It's a battery manufacturer. So they're in a shared joint venture with Ford where they're making the batteries, Ford's making the trucks, and obviously they're on the site putting that together, hopefully with multiple other tenants for that site. So I don't know the history of that particular company, but I know regardless of what their history is, those same clawback provisions are going to apply to them in this joint venture. So that same 10-year clawback provision is going to apply to this regardless of what their background is. And the state will be protected against bankruptcy. So for some reason, this went very bad on their investment. I mean, again, it's almost a $6 billion investment for Ford and SK. And I think it's SK, somebody correct me on that, but I think it's SK Innovations. So we are protected even from bankruptcy from that. I mean, they can't bankrupt on this commitment. And if they don't meet their commitments on the job creation, then we get the people's money back.
Representative Beck.
Very good. And I did not Google SK. I Googled S&K, which was a petroleum company. So couldn't figure out how they were getting in on this, but I'll Google the right company this time.
I don't think there's any petroleum there that I know of.
And second question, lastly, I know we were talking about the 5,800 direct jobs to the manufacturing facility, but how many spinoff jobs do we estimate? With the dashboards and the upholstery, and I know with Nissan, something like 20,000 spinoff jobs. So what are we looking at for spinoff jobs above and beyond the 5,800 jobs at the plant?
Leader Lamberth.
So about 27,000 jobs is what they're estimating in the area with over $1 billion of earnings. And then it would contribute approximately $3.5 billion each year to Tennessee's gross state product. Those are estimates, and I will tell you, I mean, I appreciate you asking the question, but the reason that we've not really included that in a lot of the discussion we've had is that the return on investment specifically of the people's money, which we're spending tax dollars to invest in this, how long would it take for those tax dollars to come back in? All of that ancillary growth just speeds that equation up. But anytime I'm presenting a bill, I try to give you kind of the most conservative and almost, most careful presentation of how long it would take, and 15 years is kind of the outside. With all the rest of that growth, if it happens as fast as they anticipate, I mean, that could be 10 years or less, but 15 years is kind of the outside just on the direct investment. The rest of that, the sky's the limit. I mean, you're talking constructing homes, you're talking additional businesses, everything I was saying earlier, but approximately from what they're saying here, 27,000 new jobs from just direct activity from that, and then just more and more beyond that.
All right, members, next on my list, I've got Chairman Kumar, then Chair Lady Hazelwood. Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Presenter. It's been a very good discussion. On a lighter note, I'd like to offer a clarification that SK has nothing to do with Sabi Kumar.
Thank you for that clarification.
In my community, the concern is just such large amount of money, such a big bucket of money that is being spent. And people are overwhelmed by it, and they want to know, when will we get a return on this investment? And they see the need. Most of the people in my community know about West Tennessee, and they see the need, and how I tell them about the mega site that has been waiting for a suitable person to take it. They are impressed by it, but yet, as I said, they worry when you say 500 million or 800 million plus money. The one thing going from those mega numbers to micro numbers, what I find is that I'm trying to buy a car. One of our cars needs to be traded, and the prices are really up. There are no discounts. And the reason, of course, is shortage of chips as well as shortage of parts and so on. And I think, no, that's too much. But what is that car worth? That car is worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it. and somebody is willing to pay for it. Otherwise, they would give me a discount. Similarly, we are competing with 49 other states to attract a company that can handle a project that big. And I think in that competition, in that competitive market, the prices have gone up. And that's what we're going to have to pay. It is still worth to improve the lives of Tennesseans in West Tennessee. And overall, it is still worth to do this. Although we do it with concerns, and I think the way the legislation is crafted, including the clawbacks as well as various controls and the way the board will function, I'm comfortable with it. And thank you for doing it. But I thought it is really the market driving the price, no matter how high it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just wanted to point out, I don't believe the speaker, the leader has mentioned to date, but in addition to the long-term jobs that we're talking about and the return on the investment in that regard, there's also an almost immediate return on investment when this construction starts on this project. There's going to be a huge number of jobs related to the construction itself. There's going to be sales tax revenues related to the materials that are bought to go into the construction. And again, to tag on to Chairman Howell's comments, I live in Chattanooga, as you all know, and Volkswagen, we have the state and the community, because in our case, the community put in several $100 million as well. There has been a great return on that investment, and I don't think you would find anybody in Chattanooga who would say we shouldn't have done that, and hopefully at the state level as well, because those dollars have flowed not only into our county, into our cities, but also to the state. And I fully expect that to happen in West Tennessee. But it is not only the indirect jobs that will come later, but it's all of the ancillary things. You know, these people who are going to come to work for the construction are going to need places to stay. They're going to need food to eat. So there's going to be just a tremendous economic impact, positive economic impact, almost from day one, which is only going to grow as the operations are up and running. So again, this is a large investment, but it's very similar to what we have done in the state for Saturn, for Nissan, and for Volkswagen. The difference is this will be going on a mega site in West Tennessee, as was pointed out earlier, that we have spent a great deal of money in to date, getting ready for such a project. So I think we should all be excited, and I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Next up on my list, I've got Chairman Curcio, then we'll go to Speaker Marsh. Chairman Curcio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Leader Lambert, thank you for the explanation of what you've gone through this morning. It's clear that you're the right person to be carrying this legislation. Great description of what we've got here. And I want to echo some of the sentiments that I've heard. I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Tennessee. And I agree with our speaker that Ford's not going to change Tennessee. We're going to change Ford. I'm proud to know that Ford Motor Company has seen what thousands, hundreds of thousands of other folks around the country have seen, which is that Tennessee's got something going on. It's a great place to live, work, and raise a family. And I'll be proud to call these folks my neighbors to the west. One thing I did as I looked through this, and this is not a criticism by any means, rather just a statement that I want to make, and it's something that I know is near and dear to your heart as well, Leader. But when we talk about growing infrastructure, we think about bridges, we think about roads, we think about pipelines, and we think about Ford Motor Company. We often overlook public safety infrastructure. And so I will be watching very closely over the next few years as this part of the state grows, Lord willing. That is certainly our intention. But we'll need to keep a close eye on public safety measures and fundings for, things like judges and law enforcement and public safety and those kinds of things. So as a part of the state grows, of course, we need to look at all that infrastructure needs. So I just want to encourage members of this body and you, Leader, and I know we'll work together to continue monitoring that. But it is something that sort of occurred to me as I read through these appropriations over the weekend that we often overlook that public safety infrastructure. And so, just want to go on record as saying, let's keep an eye on that as we move forward. But thank you so much for bringing this legislation. I appreciate your effort on it.
Thank you, Chairman. Speaker Marsh.
Chairman.
Leader Lambert. Let me go to you first. Leader Lambert to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd be remiss. Thank you for your compliments on my presentation today. But I will say Leader Gant, Representative Hurt have done the bulk of the presentation at this point in the other committees. And they worked very diligent to get this, as well as a host of other sponsors. And And to your point, I'll read you a Henry Ford quote since they've been around for, I think, 117 years. I looked that up real quick. To do more for the world than the world does for you, that is success. Now, that's pretty cool from a fellow who was making cars. So, I mean, it's a great company. They're only one tenant. It's the mega site. But it's just a quote I kind of liked and thought you might as well, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we'll go to Speaker Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Leader Lambert, I think you've done a great job of presenting this throughout what I've heard. And I think it's a great project. I've got a question that I really don't understand. This mega site is, I understand, around 4,100 acres. Ford is going to take around 3,600 acres. So there's 500 acres left. But on the 3,600 acres that Ford is going to take, is there room in that 3,600 for suppliers or for first tier suppliers, or is that all going to be Ford? The way I was understanding that maybe some of the suppliers would be on the 3,600. So we're actually, if that's the case, we're actually bringing in more industry. I know we got the 500 more acres that we can sell, but is Ford taking up the 3,600, I guess is my question. Completely.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker Marsh. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you. And I'll have to get you that answer to that question. It was my understanding as part of this, what the Ford portion of it, Blue Oval City was going to, that's a joint venture between Ford and SK Innovations. And anyone else that wishes to partner directly with them. The other 500 acres is room for growth that folks maybe outside of that partnership that don't wish to be part of that joint venture, but may wish to still be included on this mega site. And so we definitely have some room there for some others, but the bulk of it is going to be the joint venture between Ford, SK, and potentially whomever else that would fit there. I will get a more direct answer to that question, though, as far as how much of that is available for others, but I believe that is set aside for the joint venture on whomever may be a part of that joint venture. And by the way, I genuinely thought you might have been calling previous question there, but
not so fast, Leader, not so fast. All right, we've got a couple more. Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is going to change, as Speaker said, and as you've said, Leader, it's going to change this area forever. And just a few comments, I hope we're not looking to change Ford, and I hope Ford's not looking to change Tennessee. But if one's going to change the other, I hope Ford changes Tennessee, because the average salary in Tennessee right now is $32,000. The average salary for Ford Motor Corporation is $92,000. So let's hope Ford changes Tennessee a little bit. Thank you.
Leader Lamberth to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to my friend from Davidson County, I think we can both agree that change and increased wages and better lives is always a good thing. So in other changes, we may disagree, but in that one, I can and share in your zeal that increased wages are a good thing.
Next on my list, I've got Representative Warner. Representative Warner, you're recognized.
Call for question, Mr. Chairman.
Question has been called. Is there objection to the question? Seeing none, we'll vote on House Bill 8002. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. That objection, this will be going on today's regular calendar. All right, members, that takes us to the last item on our calendar, which is item number 2, which is House Bill 8001 by Leader Lamberth. Leader Lamberth, you recognize we have a motion second. Bill's properly before us. Members, before we open up for discussion and questions, Leader, I'm going to come to you because we did add an amendment in finance before this bill came here, and it is on this bill, I believe. Could you explain that amendment? And then also, as you explain that amendment, some questions I've gotten from East Tennessee is about ensuring that there is some type of East Tennessee representation on that board. So if you could speak to the amendment and East Tennessee representation on that board, that would be great. Leader Lamberth.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and I may have misheard you, we just finished 8002, I believe, and are moving on to 8001. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So when you said first item on the calendar, second, I want to make sure we are now back on what we have labeled House Bill 1.
Yes.
And as far as your question, as far as representation on the board, there was an amendment that was added in the last committee, and this is available on your dashboard. I'm still the one dinosaur still using paper in here. It's great stuff, by the way, but if you want to use it on page 8, and I think that will match up for you guys that are looking at a digital version on the dashboard of amendment coded 10024. And in that amendment, it makes it very clear that these appointments from both our speaker, the lieutenant governor, and the governor can come from anywhere in the state of Tennessee. So they absolutely can be local. And we had a nice, robust discussion, I think, in finance about the value of both local representation and folks from outside to give a good cross section of individuals that will be on this board.
Thank you, Leader. Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And along those same lines, Leader, we passed the first legislation, which is the dollars. So let's say we just stopped right there and took it to the floor, voted on it. We've got all the structure for the authority and all of this already in statute. Am I not correct? We don't really need the second bill at all, do we?
Leader Lamberth.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that would be incorrect. We have to have the second bill to partner with the first one. It is what puts in the checks and balances on how that money is going to be spent. And a lot of the back and forth we had on the appropriations, it is critical that we have someone watching the store, so to speak, when you're investing $884 million of the people's money. And quite frankly, that doesn't just need to be local folks. I mean, it needs to be a more expansive board. And quite frankly, it needs to be a board that goes through the sunset cycle, just like this one will. It needs to be a board that has both executive and legislative appointments. This is a massive project. And quite frankly, it is one that needs a body that the state has a say in, because we purchased the 4,100 acres. And again, Tennesseans from Mountain City to Memphis are investing their hard-earned dollars in this project. So we've got to have some accountability there for how that money is being spent.
Representative Mitchell.
And I agree with you. We could have we could have legislation with a clawback provision, or we could expand the current board. But let's just say, we were building this in the industrial park in Portland, Tennessee. I would safe to say you would want some representation from your community up there overseeing this, especially when those people have been doing it for the past decade or more. They've been part of this board. It's their community. And, we all agree it's going to drastically change this area, this community. We've seen what Spring Hill was, cow pastures, and what Spring Hill is today with GM moving in. This is quite a bit bigger than what that place. So we know what it's going to do to the area. So I just wish we would have some guarantees that it was local. Yes, it's all statewide money. Do I want to sit here and say, you better have someone from Middle Tennessee or Nashville on this board? No, I don't think that's necessary, but I do think it's necessary that you have someone from that community that is invested and knows the history and knows the background of the community. So that's my only bad part of this whole deal. I could look at it like, why are we doing this power grab to be able to appoint all these people? Understand the clawbacks. I just wish there was something we could do to make sure that community had some say-so in the way in which their community is going to be drastically changed. And the piece of legislation as it is right now does not have that guarantee to those people.
Leader Lamberth, the response.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And by the way, I know you know Sumner County well, and you mentioned Portland. You may or may not know this, but Mr. Larry Collins passed away. And so he's been buried this week. And those of you that may not know Mr. Collins, Representative Mitchell and I knew him and his family well. And he literally built that industrial park that you mentioned. And it was a truly private venture. And to ensure that it was truly private input, he owned the land. He had local folks involved and that kind of stuff. And he would partner with the local IDB board from time to time. But for the most part, it was Mr. Collins out there on a bulldozer, prepping land and everything and investing his own hard-earned dollars. So I totally understand the importance of having local folks involved, and please do reach out to the family and offer your condolences. And I was going to save this for the floor, but I will say, please have all your prayers be with the Collins family if you don't know them, and they were phenomenal folks. But for this, and back on this bill, I trust our speaker and the lieutenant governor and the governor to take all that into account and to appoint the best folks they can possibly find, either local or not. But I think you've made that point very clearly. I think others have as well. I think the speakers will listen to everyone, and then I trust them to appoint the best folks available. So,
Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leader Lambert, good work to you and the gentleman with you on this bill. I appreciate the work. Question, we all know the importance of the Government Operations Committee here in the state of Tennessee. At what point in this venture do we see, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, but at what time would the Joint Government Operations be able to have an oversight on what's going on in this mega site?
Leader Lambert.
and I don't think we have a member of legal in here that could answer this, but there's a cross-reference to the GovOps committee, and it puts it into the normal sunset cycle. And what I was given yesterday is that June 30th of 2023, it would be in that cycle. There was some conversation I had with the chairman of GovOps, and if you'll get me between now and the floor, about potentially it would be 1 year out instead of 2 years out. But within the next year to two, this mega site authority will be back before GovOps, and obviously could be back sooner than that if the Government Operations Committee chose to bring them back in at a more expedited hearing.
Representative Reedy.
Yeah, thank you for that response. And of course, a lot of folks don't know when the new boards start up, there's a sunrise instead of a sunset. So the sunrise will give all of those on the Government Operations Committee, both the Senate, the House, that there will be the oversight. We will be watching what's going on, and there's members on the Government Operations Committee from clear across the state. But thank you, Leader Lambert. Thank you, Mr. Speaker or Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thanks.
Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, we'll be voting on item number 2, which is House Bill 8001. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. This bill will be on today's regular calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you, sir. Members, any additional personal orders, questions, prayer requests? Seeing none, we are adjourned, subject to call of chair.